everyone. Happy Thursday and happy VS Code Livestream Thursday. I'm Olivia. As always, I am so excited to be here to host another one of our amazing guests. We have a really exciting show in store for you today. We're going to have Harald, who's a PM on the VS Code team, come on and talk a little bit more about GitHub Copilot chat and the VS Code integration with it, and just show off all the really cool features. If y'all ever attend our monthly release parties, you've seen kind of a lot of those new features that come out monthly. This is going to be great for you to get a whole lowdown of everything that's awesome and everything you can do with it. So it's going to be great. Make sure that you are dropping any questions in the chat because we will be watching out for those so we can get everything answered. While you're in the chat, go ahead and let me know where you're watching from. I love seeing how all over the world we have our viewers. So definitely say hi. And before we kick things off with Harald, we actually are going to go ahead and show a TikTok Throwback Thursday.
If you're a developer that works with a bunch of different languages, you've got to try Code Runner because it makes setting your environment up so easy. Like I have a simple app here that's in Python. I can drop some Python code and just to execute it, just go right to the arrow here and run it. Rise and shine in Python. Right next to it, I have something in JavaScript. Drop some JavaScript code here and hit that same triangle. Boom. JavaScript execution done without any issues. And even with Java, drop some Java code here, execute it, and boom, rise and shine in Java. And there's so much more languages you can try. So go ahead and give it a shot. Code Runner.
I love those TikToks that we have that just kind of feature an extension and do that spotlight. Because I feel like there's so many extensions that you don't realize you need until you see it and you're like, yes, that's exactly what I was looking for. Okay, so I see in the chat we got a lot of hellos. Hello from Germany. Thank you so much for being here. Oh, hey, Doug from New York. Doug, I'm sure you're going to have lots of great questions for us today. I know you use Copilot quite a bit, so excited to see what you think of today's stream. Hello from India. Another Darshan also in India. Anthony in Georgia. David in Seattle. Oh, lots of great people from Pakistan, from Sweden. See, I love this. I love just seeing how all over the world everyone is. From California, Portugal. Thank you all so much for being here. Welcome to our stream. I really think you're going to love today's show. And with that, let's actually go ahead and bring on our guest, Harald. Hey, Harald.
Hey, audience. Good, good. Hello from California here.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. And I'm coming from South Carolina. So even the host here, we are bi-coastal.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. How are you doing today, Harald?
Good, good. It's been when collecting all the demos. I was like, it doesn't fit in an hour. So I think I have enough to come back.
There's so much good stuff. Yeah, but it's a good problem to have, though.
Yes.
It's like,
yes.
Okay, there's so much good stuff. How do I condense it into 1 hour? And the good thing is, if y'all don't know, we stream every single Thursday. So if we don't get to things you guys want to see more of something, let us know in the chat and we'll have Harald come back on and we can do a part 2. So yeah, Harald, do you want to talk a little bit about, what you're going to be showing today, and we can even dive into the demo when you're ready?
Yeah, definitely. So I work on VS Code and I work on Copilot chat. So all the things I'm showing off, we start showing some of these at GitHub Universe. All of what you see is going to be also from pre-release. So if you have Copilot, check out the pre-release version. Best to run in VS Code Insiders, which is also our kind of pre-release version of VS Code. So a lot of things have been really, coming in the last month. What's interesting now, we have a super long iteration. Usually we release monthly, but this one is a combined one of December and January because we don't want to release in the new year and give everybody some time to switch off. So that's been kind of why there's a lot more than usual, and it's all in pre-release. So a lot of these things are coming out end of the month. So you'll see that. But if you want to kind of follow along, if you want to try it out, and I'll try to every time point it out when it's just in pre-release. But if in doubt and you don't see it in release, it's definitely in pre-release. Okay. But yeah, the theme is really staying in the flow. I think that's a big part of AI in your coding flow, where it just takes you to a level where you can stay at one layer of abstraction. So that'll be one, and just distraction. And it's a live stream. So I'm curious, what AI tools people use for coding. So just to get an idea, like I can go deeper into some parts and others, but I assume people know some AI. So, but if you don't, if you're totally new, let me know.
Yeah, let us know in the chat.
Yeah, so follow along in the chat. Other than that, yeah, it will be a whirlwind of all the things. But yeah, I think for flow in general, it's interesting what actually means. And I'm curious from the audience as well, if you have any parts of the demo that you want to see more of, or any use cases, do you feel like this would improve my flow? I'm happy to demo those as well.
Nice. We have a couple of responses coming in, and so far we're at 100% people are using Copilot. So
that's a Copilot.
That's awesome.
And you can mention other products too.
Yeah, it's okay. You we won't blacklist you if you say something that's not Copilot.
Yeah, like I also still use ChatGPT and constantly play around with other tools around. It's just so exciting what people try out with AI. And it really levels up everybody. So
yeah, and I think it's an important part too to like see what other tools there are, and you can think, oh, this would be really cool if we could bring this into VS Code. That's how you have that.
And I think
that advanced integration.
Yeah, and a lot of them have free trials available as well. So I would definitely encourage you to try it out, because like not all of them, they all move at different paces. They all try out the different ways to use AI. So I think they all end up now, I think, getting closer to what Copilot chat, the little features I show, you will find more and more in other products. So there's definitely some looking at what each other's doing part. So cool. And the first question's popping in as well. But let me start it off. As people ask questions, so kind of first off, so hey Copilot, what does coding in the flow actually mean for developers? Just to get an idea. So I love using Copilot for that kind of brainstorming. So coding in flow, thank you Copilot, explaining coding. And then flow is really this state of deep focus and immersion. And both contexts are crucial. I like that you picked up on coding as a concept in development. Like that's basic, but true. So how do I get into this flow state? Any tips? And what I'm using here is VS Code Speech. It's an extension, and it will give you this microphone in all Copilot inputs. And that's just the first round of just giving you voice input. And really check out the keyboard bindings. You can play a lot around with just hitting a key binding and starting your command, and then Copilot will pick it up for you and kind of continue replying. But there's many different ways to use it, actually. So either it's holding it and using it, and then handing it over. So there's many ways that you can configure this without hitting that shortcut button. That's pretty cool.
And VS Code Speech basically will add that microphone anywhere you can interact with Copilot, right?
Yes, we're trying to get it into all kind of places. And this is just like the model we're using. It has the input mode, but it could also do output. So we're also looking at other ways we can improve that. And I think some will say, like, why would you use speech? Like I'm amazing with my keyboard. That's all I use. Like, and I'm in the office. Why would I speak to my computer? I think we saw this a lot with GitHub for voice, or they have in GitHub Next have a voice product as well that they experimented with. And it's so many people that struggling with typing the whole day. It's nice to just kind of lean back occasionally and let the machine do the typing for you. Just people struggling with getting their words on paper and just having somebody to brainstorm with.
Right.
So I think, and if you try out like the voice mode in ChatGPT, there's something really magical if you can start talking with an AI and just kind of let your thoughts flow. But I think the accessibility is really front and center, and that's something the VS Code team really cares about.
Yes, so yeah, I love the focus that the team has on accessibility. And I think kind of to your point with coding in the flow and people being like, oh, why would I want to do that? The point is it's your flow. So like Copilot really kind of generates or integrates in whatever your flow is. So for a lot of people, like you're saying, this is super helpful to kind of have these brainstorming conversations and actually be able to speak to it. But, if it's not your thing, you can still just keep typing. It's, you have those options there, which I think is kind of also a key guideline, is you can kind of figure out what works best in the context of how you are developing.
Yeah. And to pick up an answer or a question from the chat, so it's this complete side panel that you have here in VS Code. It's GPT-4 powered, and that's but I think we usually try to define, like, right now it's GPT-4 is a point in time. We do run experiments on other models. We have a big offline eval suite, and that's something the kind of best practices in AI engineering that are really emerging, is like this scientific approach to how you actually switch models. And I think there's a lack of understanding, like, how it's pitched is you just drop in a new model and you unlock amazing capabilities, but that's not really how these models work. So they all have their sweet spot and their kind of weak points. And we see that actually in our offline eval, we run it against different languages, and we see how good is it writing code, documentation, tests. So we have these big breakdowns, or how good is it in understanding your code base. And what's interesting, GPT-4 doesn't excel at everything compared to 3.5. Some models are suddenly better at C#. Some models are suddenly better at Haskell, which you wouldn't imagine. Like, why is one language different between the languages? You're just going to elevate them up. If you see the graphs and how the benchmarks go, it's just like all over. They all somehow improve. So I think that's where, and you can open the logs and GitHub Copilot chat as well to see, like, which model is being used.
Okay.
One of them is pretty noisy, but I wouldn't over-index on which model is used. I think people like to see it because, like, that's what they're paying for with OpenAI. So you're somewhat trained to really care, like, I want the latest and greatest. So we're doing the work in the background to pick the best model for the job. And right now we see, for inline chat, we're experimenting now with some more models. I'm going to show that later. And then right now, point in time, GPT-4 is what's in the side panel. And of course, then always updating, because there's always other factors as well, like the knowledge cutoff, like the newer GPT-4 models, GPT-4 Turbo, and the new 3.5 has a knowledge cutoff from end of last year, I think, or something. So there's more considerations, but really data driven and running benchmarks and experiments.
All right, so lots of experimentation going on kind of behind the scenes to see what is the best model for it. And then that's kind of also why, it's not in your face, hey, you're using this, because it kind of depends on the context and where you're using Copilot, even within VS Code, correct? Yeah,
and that's partially about capacity, like just what models are available in the pool we're using. But a big part is also just the user experience, because the more the other models have different performance characteristics, like GPT-4 is a lot slower. So in some cases, you maybe want to have that control. So we also think, like, giving people control to pick the model, because some, as in chat, you see, like, are really like GPT-4 has to be the model.
Yeah.
So if you want that, we want to give you that option. But otherwise, we let Copilot chat steer the way it needs to go.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, and thanks y'all for all your questions and kind of voicing, because I think this is a great point of VS Code we developed in the open. So kind of getting this feedback is super helpful. And like Harald was saying, they're thinking about adding into it where you can actually say, okay, use this model. All these are things that we get from y'all's feedback. So we appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely. It's awesome. So too, if you have more feedback, there's a button up here as well to report feedback. So we always, you'll see me in there and the rest of the team. So kind of looking at the big ones, so we have eliminated distractions around flow and using tools effectively. So that's kind of what I want to go in. So how do we use Copilot to do that? And what do I mean actually by that? So we have, if you look at Ghost Text, it has this magical motion. I think that's where I see some people initially struggle, that it's a little bit more noisy to use. Like suddenly it will pop in and give you, maybe I'm going to export here, and so one pop in. So there's a moment of training yourself around using it. So you have to understand, like, when do these ghost text suggestions pop in, when you actually need them, when you feel like you have high confidence in a task and you just want to code and Copilot gets in the way. So I think one thing I would recommend, the trial, if you haven't used it yet, is 1 month long. So it's 1 month. You can kind of see if you can build up the habit. And I think that's where I see moving from like, oh, this is annoying, this is in my way, to people who build the habit. You see, they describe this problem where they're in an airplane, they're suddenly in the airplane mode, and the Copilot isn't popping in, so just sitting there and waiting there. And that's when you know you have the habit, if you put yourself into airplane mode and you're just suddenly waiting. And that's not bad.
Wait, I have to type this? Yeah.
Yeah, right. It's like typing without intelligence suddenly, right? You suddenly like, where's my ghost text? And you're just idling, then you realize, and you switch modes to the old typing mode where ghost text isn't popping up all the time. And that's, I think, where it goes from annoying, like this is noisy, like I want to switch it off, please give me a toggle, and you forget about it, to, oh, this is just in my flow and I don't even have to think about it. So a lot of these things are about habit.
So yeah, and I mean, that's, with any new tool, you're going to kind of have like a little bit of adjusting to be like, okay, what is this? But, and Harald, to your point, you mentioned kind of like, okay, well, maybe if you're like really confident in a task, like it's going to be distracting, something like that. So depending on what level you are in your development journey, some beginners love this straight off the bat. Some people who are like, oh, this is a code base I know really well, like this is adding to it. It is just kind of honing that habit to work with whatever your flow is, again, to, kind of make it make the most sense.
Yeah, so to kick off a new session, so I think one of the habits is like, don't switch context. So use GitHub Copilot Chat as your replacement for a search engine, right? So in this case, I can ask, for example, a question: how do I functional programming in React? And there's a lot of good blog posts around. There's a lot of things you can read, but you can also just point the question directly in GitHub Copilot Chat. Don't switch around much. It picks up more context from what you're working on, gives you an example, and shows you that you can write this as a hello world function and props and use this function, and giving some extra examples as well. So it goes into all the details, gives you examples in context while staying in your repo, and you can actually pick those up right away from here and run with them, apply them to your code, and do a few more things with them. But in some cases, you also may want to say, like, I want to actually have a more concrete example. I think that sometimes then that's something you wouldn't easily do on Stack Overflow or Google, where you want to say, I actually want to have this specific example of a stopwatch component. That's what I'm working on, and I'm struggling like how to wrap my head around. So you're combining two concepts, and that's what AI is great at. It can pick up, oh, you want to do a stopwatch. I know what that is, and I now know what function programming is, so I can give you a full component. In this case, so to explain what happened here, so we do as evaluate actually. So when you use Copilot as an enterprise, you get protection against copyright infringement. So that comes from Microsoft. That also comes from the GitHub site. And to get that, you have to have public code detection enabled. And I think what's happening here, there's an amount of characters, I think it's 150 by default, that are being matched. If that happens, go back. You can actually take this last statement and try it out to see if you can get an example that doesn't have, that is not licensed elsewhere. And what we're checking against is licensed code that we know. So in this case, I'll just continue on. But I can also get enough of an idea from this example, like, oh, in this case, it's using a class. It's not a functional programming component, and just continue on. So, and yeah, we're constantly working. If you see those and you feel like this is, why would you snippy that? Like, why did you remove that from me? You can also click on helpful, and we'll make sure to get some eyes on that as well. And yeah, so if you are in the settings, click on the Learn More link. It's controlled by your organization by default. So if you're in an enterprise, it's a setting for GitHub Enterprise. I'm in the Microsoft org, so that's why it's default on for me. And that's where I want to give you control. If you have it off, auto not blocking, you will actually see in the future which licenses apply. So it gives you an idea of how to proceed. If you can make a decision as a developer how to use that code.
So it's kind of like it gives you the information, and then it's
Yeah.
kind of like proceed with what you're comfortable with, or like what you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you can definitely say like, I totally expected that to happen.
Right,
And
yeah.
I'll be able to talk about this as a value prop.
Mhm.
And I think it's something you want. It's something that is not happening in other AI tools that I see out there, but it's a really key important to using AI. It's just that having the security, and we're doing more things. We're also having new filters now for insecure code that are rolling out. So if there's any patterns in the code that we know you shouldn't use in production, we'll also tell you we won't block it from you, but you will get notified. License code is in there. So there's a lot of AI responsibility happening in, in these responses that protects your code and protects what you're working on. This is especially important in large it's enterprise setting.
Yeah, I feel like that's like a whole deep dive we could go into. But I feel like there is a lot of responsible AI is very important, and everyone's constantly kind of trying to figure out the best way to properly figure out where the onus is on. Is it the user? Is it just letting them know about it? Is it blocking? And so I think that this is all really great context for people to know.
Yeah. And if you're unsure like why you have it in your settings, so definitely check out your Copilot settings on the GitHub homepage, and then that should explain it as well.
Okay, and we do have a few questions. One on I guess those license copyrights again. So Fuel Snable says, is the copyright of the license included? Could you speak a little bit more about that? Because you kind of mentioned seeing the license.
So that's something that's already happening in Copilot. I think the content exclusion and then some other projects there are in preview. I already see them in my own tools on GitHub. So that's being worked on. So basically right now we have a setting of blocking, and that just says like this included license text, but we actually have the information. So we will pull this as we go into the UI as well. If you don't have it set to blocking, you will get a notification like what license this code is under and how we found it. So you can make that call. That's not in yet, but it's something we're working on.
Awesome. And then someone says, when will this be in VS Code? This is, Harald is demoing in VS Code. So it's in VS Code. Some of these are pre-release. But yeah, just get you can get the Copilot chat extension and then sign up for the trial if you don't already have it, and you can be doing this exact same thing.
Yeah. It will just, basically just your starting point is install Copilot, and then you will get completions and chat, and then we'll just ask you to sign into GitHub, and then we're guided to get into your trial. So.
And then there are a couple questions around the history of your chat with Copilot. So how much history can Copilot chat keep? Can one thread work through a whole project?
Yeah, so give you a quick UI tour, which I'll find for later. So you can quickly switch between past chats. One way I like this as well is you can actually pop this into the editor. So then I can open another one here, and I can actually now I can pop this also into a new window because we now have floating windows. So you can actually open this up here, and then you can keep this as kind of your assistant throughout. So especially on large screens, like basically avoiding going to a big hustle on search engines and reading long articles, having that window, I think, is part of the solution where you don't want to do that. So I think one part of the question is also like how much memory does it have? So, and that's the thing where it's hard to tell sometimes, depending on how much other context you throw in. We try to prioritize anything that's in the moment that you're adding. So if you reference a file, if you have code selected, if you have a big chunk of code selected, that will basically use up a lot of your token window for the AI. So we're continuously expanding in how many tokens we allow, but we also know that models aren't good at keeping massive amounts of tokens, kind of making good use of it. So we're trying to prioritize how we kind of push more context in. So if you're really only asking questions like I just did, and that's basically everything you see on the screen is what you have in context, you can actually have longer conversations. I think that's the way. So keep in mind kind of how much context you throw in on top of the conversation, and you'll see definitely if you notice that a question is kind of off and you don't want to keep in memory, you can actually hit the little X button on the question, so you can take it out of memory. So you can, and people do that on ChatGPT and other places as well. They like really deeply curate around what the AI knows. So I can definitely recommend that habit, so you can understand. You have a mental model of like, oh, the AI knows this question and it has this context, and that's what the answer informs.
Awesome. Okay, so we have a lot of other questions. I'm just going to pick a couple. So Harald, you can continue on with your demo. But one follow-up question with the licenses. If you were to paste in a snippet of code, would Copilot license check that to see if it's copyrighted?
I don't think it runs on the input, because I'm not trying to prevent you to work on open source. So we're trying to prevent the AI kind of parroting open source. And it's not like the AI doesn't like go into GitHub and copy over code that's licensed. It's just, it's part of the training data. And that's something where it's just, the licensing systems are very messy. Like not every code you find has a clear license file attached, and some are mislicensed. So it's not a 100% confidence place. So I think there's, so it's only on the output. But oftentimes what happens when you give it open source code and you ask it to do something with the open source code, you end up with code that looks, again, like the license code. So you end up, if you work in open source, you'll hit it more often. So I recommend for that case to switch it off.
Okay, that makes sense. There's one question asking if Copilot has the same features in Visual Studio 2022. They do have a lot of Copilot integration. I would say definitely like check out the Visual Studio YouTube channels, and they'll also post blogs to kind of keep up to date with what's released there, because it's not an exact one-to-one of what's in VS Code versus Visual Studio. But Harald, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, we're really, if you know Copilot chat and completions in VS Code, you should also feel comfortable on the VS side. So a lot of things I show, how to answer this question, how to use models, apply the same, using the same service in the back. We're talking a lot around like how we align UX. So we're if it looks very different, then we did something wrong. But mostly, I think we're trying to make the best product in the editor that integrates the way you would expect it. So I think that's where some of the divergence happens, just making it work really well for users of that product. Right?
Mm-hmm. Cool. Okay, and we'll do a couple more. So Ed has a question about the sparkle icon. They said, are those stars in front of how can I set up a basic Flash application owned by anyone? So do you want to talk about that sparkle icon just real quick? So people who maybe seen it throughout. Yeah.
So there's more of these. So I'll show some sparkles later if I get to it. But otherwise, so anytime you see these sparkles now in VS Code, maybe one other place to show them where I was typing before is in the sample. But you see these here now as well. So these really tell you that there's a thing to generate with Copilot. And we have them more in inputs now as well, like in the commit message, which I'm meant to show later. Now I can show it here. So if I hit this, it will basically look at the diff and what I've worked on, maybe past commits as well, getting some context of how we write commit messages and give me a draft. So in many cases, these are like basically generated with Copilot. They're not, in this case, they're contributed by Copilot Chat as an extension. And I think that's just a sign that this is developed by the VS Code team. So we're trying to get AI as deeply woven into every fabric and every kind of thing that people feel like, oh, this is a chore. Like commit messages, you can spend a lot of time on that.
Yeah.
And especially as you just like, oh, I fixed this, and then you write it, I fixed it, and then I fixed it again.
Spend no time on it or a ton of time. And then no time is not descriptive whatsoever. Yeah, and you're just like pushing again. Yeah.
And then you look at the logs and the commit history, you try to find something, and then it's just like fix again. And then we just give you a simple one-click way to do this. I think that's going back to flow. So these sparkles are usually around, you don't have to do prompting, you don't have to think about stuff. You can just automate a thing away that would take away your time and maybe at least get you started with a draft, right? It's really just cutting the time short without the typical AI chore of going into prompting mode. Right now, you don't go into chat like please write me a commit message for the things I changed. So that's I think where the new coding chore became prompting. And I see people, especially that have some prompting experience from using ChatGPT, spending a lot of fine-tuning and time on their prompts, where it's like, yeah, this is now just a sparkle button. So and you see a lot of, we have other places with like commands that cut this short. So I think that's the long-winded answer. Like I think sparkles became the new AI button kind of connection, and you see these as well in, I think Office as well has some connotations of those. So it just became the new AI everywhere meme.
Awesome. Yeah, good call out. Good eye. I forget who asked that question, but good question. Okay, we're gonna do one more question from Doug asking, is the token max 8K? Do you know what the token max is?
That's always changing. So there's two places we play with token sizes: the amount of response tokens we allow and the amount of input tokens. I think most people ask a question about input tokens, just how much context can I provide? And actually, again, if you open your output, if you go into here and show the output channels, and you go into chat, you actually see it being locked. So don't open now because it was messy. And that's where we show what context window you use. But it's also where we try to keep it dynamic, because again, the more context you kind of pre-allocate and use, the more specific you have to do, like how you curate that context. So many cases. So we're expanding it now, mostly within capacity of what we have, because we have a lot of users coming in. So it just like if you overload our capacity, it becomes slower for everybody. So walking this fine line of how can we make it larger, but how can we also make sure every part of Copilot chat adapts to what it uses? Because you don't want to just say, oh, like you asked a question, like let me throw in the terminal, let me throw in the output, let me show the current file, and then just very confused about what you're talking about. I think that's what people expect, like just get every context and then magic will happen. But that will make the response slower. So if you see the graphs of how much token context we provide and then how slow the response gets, and you don't want that. I think that's where, going back to flow, that's where AI can be really anti-flow in many ways, where you just have to wait for an answer. You ask a question and just sit there and you lose your flow and you think about your lunch and then maybe you run off to make a coffee while so it shouldn't be that, right? So we're trying to keep that balance. But so if you see, I think we're trying to be more transparent about what's in context, what's not. What you see, I'll show later some of the extra context being used, so that should help people to understand what's in and what's not in.
Okay, totally makes sense. Okay, so I'll let you get back to your demo, what you had planned next. There's a couple requests in the chat. If at some point you could also show Copilot chat, we've kind of been asking like general questions, but if you could also show like project specific questions too. So like actually have a project open, ask Copilot chat some questions about the project rather than the kind of general questions we've been seeing so far.
Totally. Yeah, this was my last general question actually. Cool. And just to get an idea, like oftentimes you want to have this sounding board of hey, I'm working on a project, what should I use? In this case I asked a web-based recipe app, and I know some Python, and I worked on Azure Functions to give some of your expertise, and it can really go in and ask, Flask or Django, Ginger 2 for templating, Bootstrap Bulma, in some cases it also pulls in Tailwind, and it gives you a list. So now you can actually go in as well and ask, like, is there actually for VS Code? So we have these agents talked before. There are faster ways and kind of more specialized ways to give a task. In this case, add VS Code is an agent that has knowledge of VS Code. And now I gave it Python and Bootstrap CSS and PostgreSQL, and actually ask it with that knowledge and continue my conversation, like, how would I do this in VS Code? And this is now grounded in the commands I have in some more places where I can understand the extensions as well. What's cool here now, it actually goes in and recommends me use dev container, which is a great way, which you have it on the show as well. It's a great way to use different stacks without thinking about all the pains of setup. So it even onboards you into some of that. Just to show like a last connection here is if I do this whole from scratch, if I actually wanted to get coding now, if you don't want to go in a big Q&A with chat, you can just ask it to do it for you. So in this case, we have a new command in the workspace agent, which will just give it to you. You describe what you want to do. You can iterate on it as well with feedback. In this case, it knows Python and Flask. It didn't even give it the prior decision, right? I cleared the chat before. It came up with its own stack based on it. It provided the basic scaffolding of how it looks like. And if you just want to have a proof of concept, like, oh, I can build a recipe app, then that's a great place to start. So you don't have to think about all these choices and how to actually set it up.
Yeah, I love doing stuff like this because it's just like it kind of takes out that brain work of like, okay, I need to actually scaffold this whole project. It's just like, Copilot, can you do it for me? Yeah, just a lot easier.
So since people ask, let me go into the VS Code repo and ask some good questions. Just another form factor for chat. So the panel is nice. I also like it on the other side, depending on, so if you want to keep it always open. I think a lot of people I see, like, I always want to have chat open to ask questions. But the other way you can open this is if you go into the title up here, and then you open quick chat. You see you can as well. Command-Shift-I or Control-Shift-I on Windows. And that's a different form factor. And that's, if I open this, anytime I open this, input will be focused. Anytime I ask a question, the last answer will be shown. So it's a really nice way to just use chat in the flow without constantly having it on your screen.
Right.
So in this case, I'm going to ask it. Cool pasting shortcut work. So at Workspace is an agent I showed before with Add Workspace New, but Add Workspace by default will pull in your whole code base. So it looks at a question, looks at it actually worked. So it's just cool shortcuts. I don't know what I was doing for. Take forever. Okay. So Add Workspace is a I guess what people usually see as schematic search, but by default underlying is there. But it really looks at a question and pulls in other information as well. So it knows you work in VS Code. It has the IntelliSense information and the language server at hand. So it knows a lot of the aspects of what you're working on and what you have open. So if I ask a question with Add Workspace explain disposables, it would not explain disposables at a level worth of like, oh, like I know disposables as a word, but actually go in and look at where disposables you find in the code. Is there symbols in disposable? Is there file names disposable? And give all this information to the AI. So it knows understand in a general that the disposable is applied to databases and releasing resources, but it also looks at the tests and linting rules. So it can understand disposables in the context of the VS Code repo. Okay. So that's one way. And that's kind of from a higher level perspective, if you want to navigate a repo, if you want to understand, like in a team meeting, somebody mentioned a word, somebody mentioned the concept of this repo that I don't understand. And then where do I find this information? Like, do I need to go to a wiki? Just go into your code and ask the question to Copilot. What's cool about this, we also have a semantic index run by GitHub. So if you're in GitHub Enterprise and you use GitHub Copilot chat on github.com, you will also get a similar path to ask questions against your repo. And it's not really chatting about your code. It's more of a more powerful way to navigate and search through a code base. So let's do another one, a more specific one. So now we know, so good shortcut here is Control L to just clear it out. Again, you want to kind of control what
nice. I didn't know that was a shortcut. Cool.
Yes, it works in most chat windows, I think. So in this case, how does search work in command palette? That's really understanding, like, oh, like it's really cool how this works. Like I see it all the time, but I have no idea like how this magic happens. I think one of the really cool things, if you haven't adopted the command palette in VS Code, I highly recommend it. In this case, it went in the witty. So this case, it couldn't find apparently what it was looking for. And that happens as well. Like sometimes because it chains together multiple AI calls to try to make sense of it. So if it fails once, don't dismay. So usually people are like, oh, Copilot's not good at that because I ask it once. But I think usually I do recommend just trying that again. So give it another chance to see if it can find the right information. Especially if you know.
We have a couple people in the chat saying, oh, it seems like Workspace sometimes can't see like what I want it to see. And maybe they're not getting the exact questions or answers that they expect.
Yeah, and that's the fun part with these live demos. Right. I can pick, and you see that once you are in AI, you see in recordings and live demos how people really hyper optimize the query to find the right thing. So I didn't do that step. So mishaps are expected.
I think that's good. This is real. Yeah,
that's real. So I think that's where it shows. So if you don't find a concept, and that's I think the problem with AI prompt crafting in general. If you give the wrong concept or the wrong wording to AI, sometimes it can figure it out. Sometimes it will just totally mislead into something else. So I think that's a good thing to keep in mind, understanding how to talk about things. And that's I think part of the habit building and the flow, like not understanding how prompt crafting works in general and how to explain things to AI. So I can also go into specific files now. So I didn't understand there's command field filtering overall, and you can see it under what it's grounded in. So you can see like it didn't pick up the best files here. So I could go now and say like, oh, I mean the fuzzy search and command palette. Maybe I can find better words to describe it. But just to show off some of the more cool stuff we have.
Right. So there are a couple questions. So Ed asks, is there a concept like the rest of my code? Sometimes my question is about where in my stuff is. So it sounds like the @workspace agent would be kind of appropriate for that, where you would just be like, hey, where do we define XYZ?
Yeah, totally. I think that's where you can, and you can combine the different methods. Like @workspace will look at the question and apply like, okay, which files would match this question, and then the AI will kind of take it, pick up the right context and explain stuff. So that's really the rest of my code. So @workspace is looking at everything that's open not in your editor as tabs, but anything that's in here. And we're working on things that you can control. For example, if you have a folder that you don't want it indexed, we're already using the git ignore, using your ignore settings from VS Code, so you can kind of guide it towards what it's looking at. So there's definitely more fine-tuned control. But the other way you can control it, if you go into chat now, let's just use that. So you can give it specific files as well. If you do hash file, see it down here, and that's pre-release only. So I remember saying that, but it will ship within the next iteration. You can actually give it specific files. So even if I don't have it open, so I can ask a question, for example, what fuzzy searches. And so now there's a filtering file. Actually, I'm going to close it as well. Very delayed. But so by default, if you have text selected, Copilot will look at that. I think that's the best. That's like the surefire way to curate what Copilot is explaining about. Is you have it open and you have it selected. And that's the way for inline chat as well. That's the best way. If you know you want to apply a refactor on a specific set of code, you select it and you give it to Copilot. In this case, it could pull in the filters file. It found different functions and explain them. So that's how you can even combine multiple files. You can think about, okay, I can give it that file, like use this function from that file and implement it over here. So use AI to combining the things can also help.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so there's a couple questions around this. Doug asks, can you use the pound file for more than one file, or could you use it for a wildcard, for example?
We don't do wildcards yet. That's a cool idea. I think I could imagine us thinking about like @workspace and maybe giving it a folder in the future or something else. But we don't do there's no way to really guide it. So I think that's the biggest part of it. It's all very natural language focused, but we're trying to find this middle ground of CLI to give developers control and high specificity to just want to ask a question and it should work. Right now, we're more in this control of explicit context and you want one file.
Okay, that makes sense. And then there's a couple questions a little bit more about, how can I narrow down the context that it's using? How can I take out certain files to use in the context? So just to kind of summarize what you said, like if you know exactly what code you want to look at and that you want to explain, just selecting that is going to be surefire way that Copilot knows you want to look at this.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's something we're really actively working on as well. So we just had a big team discussion this week, like what should be included by default, because I think for new users, it's great that there's a lot of content by default. But then if you just want to ask a general developer question and suddenly it answers it in the context of your current file, it also doesn't help. So, and we found like AI is still not good, especially as like developer names are all kind of weird. Like one of the things we have in our tool is called Monaco. Like that's the open source editor of VS Code. But if you'd ask like what is Monaco in a no context question, you get very interesting answers. But then you want to answer it in like, do you want to at least understand in the context of VS Code? You're in the VS Code repo. Do you want to look at the current file? So that's where we're working on. So definitely selecting a file, best path, curating really what you get into. And that's, I think, the path we're taking is more explicit. And then anytime we do something implicit, like magically, and I can show that quickly as well. So we have, let's open this function here. And filters. Something we do that's really cool. Space. So we have, if you go in now, so this is a cool function. This probably looks like it's like just like aggressive matching and pattern matching. So this is a fun thing to explain. So that's a part we do very magical things. So if just shows slower. So Copilot, explain this. Right, that's something I know TypeScript. I just want to get an idea of a function. And now what you see is not just pulling in, it gives it the code, but it has more references in here. What happens if you do /explain, it does more implicit kind of context on top of it. So it also pulls in related definitions. So it pulls in other parts of the file where things are defined that this function uses. So Node uses fuzzy score from somewhere else in the file, so it pulls in that. So I mean that's a part where we do a bit smarter context expansion, where it's just like there's more we need to answer this question. So that's I think where you see explain, fix as well. I can show that later, where we not just say, and that's what you often do in ChatGPT. You just copy over the error and you copy over code and then fix this code. But what fix actually does, it also looks up definitions that are being used that are part of the error, and it expands the stack trace if there is one and pulls in other parts of the code. And if it tried to fix it and there's still an error, it actually retries with the new error as well. So there's some iterative approach as well already built in. So I think that's where if you use the functions, and there's a function for something you want to do, and you can always check basically the command here. And I think if don't tell Copilot like please fix this error for me, but use /fix. That's the explicit way. Okay,
cool. And you can kind of see that would end up using. Does it end up using the workspace agent if you do the /fix? Because I see it's kind of like at workspace on the side too.
Yeah, we put it into at workspace because it's the most natural way. Like it does some of the at workspace functionality where it reaches out and collects more data. So that's where it doesn't use the. I mean, that's where we can do more clarification. Like it doesn't use the at workspace magic of you can give it a very broad description, but it's very kind of one task automated.
Okay, cool. So like every command kind of maps to an agent, but it's kind of okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
There was one question too, kind of on that workspace trend, where Tom was mentioning that sometimes he feels like the Copilot's not seeing everything that he wants it to see, and he thought that maybe it was permissions based. Is there any instance where workspace might not have permissions to read something or to pull something into Copilot's response?
If it's not ignored in VS Code, be in there. The
Okay.
ignore feature is only rolling out later, so that's
Okay.
in content exclusion, I think it's called on the GitHub site. That's already supported in beta for completions, but not yet in chat. So that'll be later. So right now it should, if it's not seeing something, like I showed like the command palette search one, like it worked 5 out of 5 times before for me when I tested it. That's cool. And then it's mostly around like that we try to expand the search query, like what files could be matching. So there's several LLM calls in the backend to make it work. So there's just probability stacks up, and sometimes it doesn't find stuff.
Okay, makes sense. Okay. And then we actually have one suggestion saying that they'd love to see, you showed that file command to narrow down the file. They said they'd love to see it for a directory as well too. So
very cool. Yes, definitely. I think if you can, and that's something we can actually try in natural language, because Copilot will see which files are in the that we found. So if you tell it only look at front end files, because like the search isn't just semantic search. It also looks at like these file names could match. So we do a lot more smart matching about where things are at. So you can try part of this in natural language as well. So you can like steer the AI towards just looking at files that you wanted.
Awesome. Cool.
Okay, let's do some inline chatting.
So much good stuff.
It's a lot of questions. Yeah, I think we should do like a live stream, just Copilot chat Q&A, just
Q&A. I know, honestly.
Yeah.
We could be here for hours.
Yeah, so far I went through like a quarter of my demos, so I have to come back.
We'll definitely have to have you back. This is great though.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely awesome to have these questions. So let me just throw this away. So just showed before how you can use Ghost text to type this, but how many, like, raise your hand in the chat, tell me you're using inline chat. So that's, I think chat on the sidebar is cool. Chat in the quick chat is cool to ask these questions, but most of the time you don't want to chat with your code. You just want to like get faster coding with AI. So in this case, calculate a function Fibonacci number. And I can just say, like, make this function, make it happen. Like, I don't want to describe it along many words. And it's, in this case, you see it picked up that everything's documented. Everything else in the file is documented. It picked up the style, wrote it really nicely. I think important here to stay in the flow, and I didn't show this how nicely it streams in, right? Because I scrolled up, but it will like really, like, as you see the response, you can already start thinking, like, is this what I want? Like, what next step do I need? And the big part is here that it's iterative. Like, you don't want to just say, like, okay, I accept it and then keep working on it. Like, think about a follow question. Like, what is actually make it recursive? This is using a loop. Maybe you want to live on the dangerous side and make it recursive. So you can do that too. Now it rewrote it from scratch. And recursive, it's much shorter, but maybe let's make it not recursive. So you can keep making these choices as you go through it, but keep the thing open. So otherwise, I think you lose. I know that's something we're going to fix later on, but you lose that history of how you got to the code, right? So you have that one going, and that's cool. It's a lot of n numbers now. So make readable. Yeah, and just to show you a trick, I think it's on one of the live streams that people really like, is this field has history too. So you can go in any Copilot chat field, you can go up or down. If you hit Command up or down, you can actually navigate through the code as well. So you can get escape the cursor out, kind of. And just get the last one in here is readable variables. And then we can accept it, I think. So you see Copilot going through.
Yeah, so that's streaming.
Oh, beautiful.
Next, yeah.
Just that moment, just reading along keeps me in the flow in this case.
Yeah.
Feels like, and that's something we're really tweaking. If you feel like anytime Copilot is too noisy or too busy and kicks you out of flow, I think that's where, if you look at the iterations of how we showed a diff and how things are streaming in, it's been so much focus on the team going into those kind of experience where it's like, no, it shouldn't kick you out of your flow. This should be something exciting, something you read along and you're into it.
Mhm.
So yes, I definitely want to have a whole session for just looking at things streaming in
Yeah.
with music. So
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 excited
eventually,
to do an ASMR session where
yes,
like it's just nothing but us typing and then watching the streaming.
yeah. Yeah, there's no typing sounds too. It's just, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's cool if you saw in the preview, like you have full IntelliSense. You can actually go in and add it, so it's still your code. So I think that's like key rule number one for using AI, like stay in control, not just like, oh, like this code looks great. It's sometimes hard if you don't know the area well, but you also get linting. We'll give you IntelliSense, so we make it as easy as possible. So if by chance, if I wrote this myself, I always struggle with showing like the fix aspects of Copilot, because like Copilot is actually not often great at like making errors.
Right.
It's really good at making error-free code, and if it goes wrong, it's just really wrong in different ways, but not
Right.
it still lints fine, right?
Right. Not
So
syntactically wrong. Yeah.
so this is where show us. So this is another Sparkle opportunity. So it's another place where you
Ah,
see Sparkle. So if you just have if you have one of your red squiggles, and that's really part of flow as well. Like errors are not part of what you're working on, so you don't win in the end of the day. But I fixed so many bugs while I was working on this code. So it's really like it kicks you out of the flow. So in this case, if you just go in quick fix, you can get into this menu. The same menu is behind the light bulb. If you go into here, so you see the Sparkle and then the fix of Copilot. You can explain error in this case, but I just want to fix. I just want to get out of the way. And it's mostly descriptive. Like you understand, it's kind of be applied. But then in this case, it knows that the fix is actually up here. So it knew that like, this has to be a number in this context to be correct. So and the nice part now that actually shipped recently is we actually the AI explains what's happening and gives you more context behind the fix. So it's not just like, here's a fix, it's all good, you can continue on, move on, but it gives you an opportunity to quickly read it and learn it and say, yeah, that makes sense. Like I totally can see that. So in as
and I
many
think
places
that's
as possible. Yep.
a really great functionality because I know we'll see people be like, oh, well, like I don't want to be completely reliant on Copilot and I just am accepting suggestions. I have no idea what's going on. That's why I love that, the fix does kind of have to give that explanation. So you're not just like, okay, let's just fix it. Like you're making sure, okay, is this actually fixing it how I want it to? Do I understand what's going on? So you do have that context.
Yeah. And just to kind of expand the idea of what you can do. So this is I think what people saw before, these agents, right? What we call them. So if we go in here, hit add, these are agents. So terminal, I didn't get to show. Maybe I get to it in the next live stream. Kind of ways we namespace VS Code and give you these like really nice automation tasks that just work out of the box, and you don't have to think about prompting. It just works. Same for Sparkle icons, but it can also make your own. So I think I'm definitely want to get people to try it out. This chat agent example lives in our repository with agents, with extension APIs. There's a cool blog post as well that I can recommend. So Pursuit of Wicked Smartness from last November. And it talks about this agent concept and how we were thinking about it, and gives you some ideas on how to get started. It's a proposed API, so you can try it out now. We're definitely moving on it fast. So it's a really fun way to extend Copilot with your own kind of functionality. In this case, a repo is all about cats. So this is a cat themed. We actually, I feel like just going through it quickly. So we have the activate function, which every extension has. And then it has a handler for chat requests, and it gets the request, it gets a progress indicator to report back when it's done, and it the typical stuff. And it looks at which command it got and can reply accordingly. So in this case, it if I just run this, it will be a cat, and it will say things in the voice of a cat and teach you computer science.
That's awesome.
Which we all needed.
Yeah. Cat chat. Doug said a live stream walkthrough on this concept and the extensibility would be great. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's I think definitely on our list. So I'm now in the extension development host to try this cat out. So we're gonna give it. I now can hit add, and I have my cat. and I hit teach. I'm not sure if I can actually look at the code again. What is recursive? Oh, it actually picks pointers. I think it has like a preset. Is it? Windows. Yeah, it actually it picks as hopping, so it doesn't look at what I'm typing.
Okay.
So it starts, explaining pointers with fish and red dots. So that's very, very cat-like. But now I can. So let's
I like that meow button.
Yeah. So I think that's what people have to figure out. So now I have selected the whole thing, and I say with inline edit, what if I don't want to have a cat? And that's where usually many sample apps start with. Like here, we give you some scaffolding with an example functionality, and you kind of go in and you delete it all, and you start from scratch. But I want to change this agent from a cat to a QA tester that drafts the test plan. Like that's my, and that's maybe the idea for the whole session. And I just want to make it a change, and that's where you can really expand, like from inline chat to just make some code or rewrite some function. Just give it a whole file and tell it what to do. Like we saw people rewriting from Gulp to another automation engine, and Copilot did an amazing diff of just like, I know both these technologies. I know what you currently have and understands from the example code that's still in there of how the patterns work. So in this case, it made a QA tester. It gave it a subcommand draft, gave it a prompt that you're a QA tester. And just it's a lot shorter, so it removed all the cat commands as well, and it has a follow-up for saying thank you to QA, which is amazing.
Yeah.
So you should definitely thank the QA.
You should.
Team. And so you can again go in, and it now you see that it actually has accept buttons on every single one of these. So basically where to apply changes. Get in, and now I can go in and actually run this. I see here it in the QA tester, it just applies to the prompt. So maybe here I even say that I want to have more context, right? It should include more context from the current file that I'm in, actually.
I feel like this is so powerful. I mean, like if you were having to adapt this yourself, like you'd probably be doing like find and replace. You'd be just like going through. You'd end up missing something somewhere. Like, and this is so helpful.
Yeah. So it's cool now. It put up, and that's something we're working on a ton of. That's where a lot of improvements happening in the chat. And notice, I have to one change is up here. So that's where it picks the active editor, and then where it puts the user messages here. It combines the user message from active editor if it has one and gets the text. So yeah, so it knows where to put it. It did it. So we can actually try this out now. It's all live. Exciting.
Yeah. So we like to see.
Yeah, but I think that's definitely its own session, like how people can adopt this within the team, especially. Like if you have an extension you can give to the team, like here, just you kept asking me about this thing, and it's not really part of my work. I love helping you, but please use this extension in VS Code to get some help from AI using my personalized knowledge, maybe some external API you hook into, like this QA tester could be connected to your QA system, could be connected to issues, your QA process. So it follows maybe a draft template even. So you can think about all kind of ways.
Yeah, there's a ton of potential there.
You can do this. So let me select it, and then yeah, we have draft.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah, I think it did change the image from a cat, so I don't have a QA JPEG in here. Now it looks like this is a Vue.js component, and it gives me a great draft of like which Vue components I should test, that there's state handling and a test structure. So yeah,
that's so cool.
From doing it in 2 minutes, I think I have a really good QA tester. So this is just as an idea, fork this the samples repo it's on GitHub. I think we're linking.
Yeah, and I feel like,
Yeah.
Copilot a lot of people's intro to Copilots, they might just see like a really quick demo where they see like, oh, that's really cool, and it kind of sparks their interest in it. There's so much potential with GitHub Copilot and VS Code and that integration. There's so much you can do from these chat agents. We barely scratched the surface, and we've been doing this for an hour basically. So I think that it's really awesome just to kind of see all the different use cases and to start thinking about, okay, how can I really bring this into every aspect of my development workflow to make it more helpful.
Yeah, and so you think it partially is changing habits. Like in the beginning, it will feel awkward. Like you have to remember to use inline chat. We try to remind you by putting up the sparkles and so if you see sparkles, like make sure like, oh, like there's a trigger in your brain. It's like, probably can do this with Copilot. So I think that's part of it. And really curate everything by having a text selection. Like inline chat is good at picking up that I needed to add stuff here. I did intentionally select more code so it knows like to put the change on there. So it's really about being intentional what you have selected and how you use it. But biggest part is just changing a bit how you code. But that changes eventually. That comes into a habit. You don't need to think about it anymore. You just say, oh, I have a refactoring. I can use Ghost Text for that.
Right.
Because it's just adding code. Maybe that's even faster because you know, do opening inline chat, but maybe sometimes it's just open inline chat, describe what you want to do, see the changes coming in, iterate with AI, and not just accept it. So,
absolutely. I know we're right around time, unfortunately, but you had so much to show. Is there anything else that you definitely wanted to show today? We can do.
Yeah, I can show more the next time, but I think one part is just one cool piece of advice. Again, find sparkles everywhere. Like we now even have them in the terminal. Hit the Command I shortcut, Command Shift I. Oh, now it's breaking. So play around with the different contexts and variables. So here's the commands. And I haven't shown too much of that, but you can even ask about terminal section, for example. So this is an area we're actively growing. So keep playing around with different shortcuts. Make sure you check out the help as well. So if you want to see more of that, we all put it here. So that's it for now. So I'll have to come back.
Awesome. No, I think that this is great. I think that help was also a great way to kind of end, because a lot of times we'll get people being like, okay, like how can I figure out everything it can do? That /help command is kind of the best way to do it because it will be up to date. Instead of looking at documentation or like a video from like 6 months ago, where obviously it might be a little different. Like using that /help directly in VS Code is how you're going to get that most up to date.
What's hard, I think, people, and that's I think a typical thing of people bias where it's like just asking the AI what it can help with. And sometimes it works and sometimes it is misleading. So we had to now in the prompt tell it it's using GPT-4 because people kept asking if it's using GPT-4, and the AI itself, the vanilla model, it doesn't know what it's built on. Like you can't ask it, like, how's the weather like in your data center region? Like it just doesn't have context, so it's not trained with information. So people expect a lot of kind of context around like what the AI knows. So mostly if I can play around, like ask you a question around like coding related things, and then you'll be in a much happier place versus interrogating the AI about what it knows. Right. And that's something we're working towards. Like the AI should eventually know, like, oh, you're asking a question about the workspace, but you haven't included that workspace. Eventually it will just do it, but eventually just understanding the right commands and getting the AI to just do the tasks is how you stay in the flow.
Okay, that totally makes sense. All right, well, Harald, this was great. I feel like it was such a great, we scratched the surface of everything.
You can so do. Fast.
I know, it does go by so fast. There's so much. I was like, oh, we have a whole hour. We can get so much in. But y'all asked amazing questions. So thank you so much for that. And for your suggestions too. That's what we love to hear. Getting that feedback. I know Harald showed at the start that just, in Copilot chat, there's a little provide feedback icon that you can click. So you don't even have to leave VS Code. If you're seeing, any issues or you want to just provide that feedback, you can do that directly in there.
Definitely.
Cool. All right. Well, with that, Harald, thank you so much for being here. I'm sure we will have you on again to do the other, probably 70% of what you had planned. But we had lots of great comments. Doug said, thank you so much. Learn new things. We had Ed say
Aw,
excellent,
thank you,
more. So yeah, lots of great feedback here. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you again, Harald, for being here and showing off some amazing features of Copilot. For those of you who maybe missed the start of the live stream or only came in for parts, the good news is this will all be available on demand on our YouTube channel. So make sure to subscribe to that and then check out the on demand. And if you subscribe to, then you'll also know when we have Harald back on to do another live stream. And then we're also available on TikTok as well. So that's a great place if you want to like find really, 30-second videos on some cool new Copilot features. That's a great place to follow us as well. So you can keep up to date with that. All right. Well, with that, Harald, thank you again. Thank you everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Olivia. Thanks, buddy.